Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook live broadcast. I'm Steve Altition, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Family Law. And today, I'm here with Attorney Ben Brown to talk about Washington protection orders, what they are, and how they interact with family law. So, Ben, before we start in, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
I practiced in Louisiana for about 6 years. That's where I'm from. And then I got licensed in Texas, and I'm recently licensed in Washington State. And moved up here to the Pacific Northwest because I fell in love with the nature up here, the mountains and the trees.
Oh, and it is a little bit different than Louisiana.
A little bit.
No question. So, before we kind of get into specifics of different kinds of protection orders, maybe we can talk a little bit about just the generality of what they are, some of their basic commonalities. I know Washington has a ton of the laws, and everyone runs around just calling them restraining orders, but they're kind of different. And so maybe just to start with the just in general, what the heck they are.
Okay. Well, I think a protective order is a more accurate term because they're designed to protect people, and at their core, what they all have in common is that they prevent contact between two people, either like in person, online, text, third parties. They put restrictions on contact if one party is, abusing it or using it for harassment or abuse.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to talk about several and also kind of how they work with like a family law case. But I know there's civil orders, there can be criminal orders, there can be some that are just used in a family law case, and maybe some that aren't. So we'll kind of try to go through those, and maybe people can help figure out what they may want to use.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the domestic violence order for protection. Obviously, it has the word domestic violence in it, and that seems to constitute that it deals with family members. Is that right? Is this mainly one for members of the family?
Family or members of a person's household. And it could also be, people who have even just dated, or previously dated.
What do they mean by family? I know some people say, well, family is my, brother and my sister, or family is my spouse. Is there a broader relationship for family? What does family or household mean?
It could be, like you said, spouses, could also be people who have children in common. Like I said, people who are dating or have dated, blood relatives, people related by marriage, or people who, just have lived together.
Yeah. So it takes in a bigger area than just the necessarily the immediate family, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And what does this order do? I mean, how does it prevent domestic violence? Is there certain things it says you can't do this, or if you've done this, someone can get an order against you?
Yes. It directs the person not to engage in any further harm to the one seeking the order. And, that may involve them having to stay away from that person, even leave the residence if they're sharing one. It can also order them to seek counseling, and just in general, it's designed to prevent them from committing any further harm to the protected person.
And I guess we're talking harm, violence in this case, I don't think means just somebody saying, I hate you because of this, or I'm going to go tell people you did that.
No, it's usually like physical violence or threats of physical violence, things like that.
Got it. So what if there's an emergency? I mean, it seems like all domestic violence is an emergency, but if someone is threatening to do something like come over right away, is there a way you can get that without going through a giant hearing, or how does that work?
Yes. There's a kind of expedited procedure for getting a temporary protection order in an emergency situation. And those are good for up to 14 days. And a hearing has to be set within that 14 days so that the court can review what the emergency is and if it's valid.
Got it. Is the person who's accused get to go to that second hearing?
Yeah, they have, I mean, it's a due process issue. They have to receive notice and they have to have the chance to show up and say, all of that's lies. This person is crazy.
Yeah. And so if the judge, here's the two of them, can they make this order temporary? Can they make it permanent? Is there flexibility?
Usually they last for a year if the court finds that it's a valid concern, but in more serious circumstances, it can be permanent. And that's just up to the court based on the circumstances.
I know, and we'll talk about it later, there's a protection order that directly relates to taking someone's firearms away. In a domestic violence protection order, can that be ordered? Can the person be ordered?
In most of them, that can be included as a precaution. Because if the person's violent or unstable, you don't want them to have a gun.
If someone just says forget it and just violates the court order, I mean knowingly, not just somehow accidentally does it, what could happen to them?
Well, it's mandatory that they be arrested for starters, and then if the court finds that they did it on purpose, then they can be held in contempt of court and criminally charged with a felony.
Okay. I mean, that's a pretty strong order. And, I know in Oregon, there's one called a FAPA, kind of Family Abuse Prevention Act, and they sound very similar. Really there to prevent, like you said, violence, to prevent with a family member. Let's talk about this. There's one actually called a restraining order in Washington. And, how does that different, from like the domestic violence order?
It's broader. It encompasses more things and is usually for less severe circumstances. It can include property issues, child support custody issues, things like that. And it's filed within an existing family law case. So for divorce or custody, it's included in it.
Got it. So this is kind of the one that says you're restrained from going into that bank account and taking all the money.
Yeah, basically.
That's
what a real restraining order is. It restrains the person from a particular action. Yeah. And it's broad enough to include anything the court needs to address.
The kind of restraining order just then say no contact. I mean, you're not gonna put maybe some huge other thing, but just don't contact with that person.
Yeah. What happens a lot of times is one party will seek a full-blown restraining order and say, they can't prove that it's necessary for all of the provisions they're asking for. But as a fallback, the court will just say, nobody talked to the other party. So both parties agree to it. It's mutual. And then that way it doesn't cause any conflict in the future.
Got it. And again, someone says, yeah, okay, judge, I won't do it. And then they go out and they do exactly what they're not supposed to do. Is there the same kind of penalties for that as there is for a domestic violence one?
Yeah, it's also technically contempt of court, but this is only a misdemeanor because you're not usually talking about serious physical harm or violence.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I imagine it's, for both parties can be an interesting situation, because if someone is especially restrained, like, not to go next near the person or something like that, and then the other person calls them up or stuff like that. I mean, imagine, you got clients who are like, well, they can't talk to me, but I'm going to call them and chew them out.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one, and this one's a kind of interesting one. It's the Anti-Harassment Protection Order, and it's, I don't know if it's a subvariant you would call it of the domestic violence one, but
Yeah, there's some overlap.
when does that thing kind of come in?
That's for, if a person doesn't qualify for a domestic violence protection order, and if they're experiencing conduct from someone that's harassing them, and if it alarms them to the extent that they're experiencing substantial emotional distress, then they can seek an anti-harassment order.
This is kind of maybe the one where someone calls 42 times a day to tell them how bad
Something like that.
Now,
Guilted, ex, or that's when it happens a lot. Well, not really an ex, but someone who wishes they were an ex, I guess.
really, yeah, they can't wait to be, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
These orders, anti-harassment orders, are they kind of like the domestic violence in that it's only family members that can get filed against, or is it that more broad? What if your neighbor keeps, coming over and yelling at you?
Yeah, like I said, there's overlap. So if it were a family member, it would, fall under like a restraining order. So this, I think, was probably put in place for specifically non-family members and other people that may be harassing someone.
No, the best friend of your soon-to-be ex.
Yeah.
I got it. And I'm going to ask it on all of them. If someone doesn't do it, if someone just keeps on harassing or, calling them up, what's the consequence of that?
Yeah, again, that's contempt of court, and it can be a misdemeanor charge as well.
How long do those last? Are they permanent?
Usually it's 1 year, but in most cases the court has discretion to make something permanent. That happens most often if a party has had to seek multiple orders, or if maybe the other party has violated multiple times. If there's some substantial circumstances, the court will just make it permanent and say, done.
Yeah. I obviously, and the state has made a lot of different protection orders. I mean, for different kind of specific areas. And that makes sense because, rather than just going with one kind of, one size fits all order, that probably makes things a lot, not only more difficult for the person to get, but more difficult for the other person to even, know what they're restrained of. And there's one, that's really specific, it seems to me, and it's the sexual assault protection order. There's one just for sexual assaults, isn't there?
Yeah. I think that's probably because they want to have added protection for something like rape.
Yeah. Now this one, is it again just for family members? What if just you met someone at work, some crazy person,
No,
sexually
this
assault?
is for non-family members.
Okay. On most of these orders, I imagine that the person has to be at least an adult to file. But what if it's a kid? How does a kid go about filing, or who files for the kid on most of these things?
If they're under 16, they have to file it through a parent or guardian.
Got it. So can the state file a sexual harassment restraining order? What if, if there's, like you said, there's a rape charge in place or something, and the person is reluctant to do anything? Can the state step in on this thing?
Yes, they have the power to do that. If criminal charges have been filed, and frequently the victim is afraid to confront the perpetrator, and maybe they don't want anything to upset them, or make them have to confront them or anything like that. So the state has the power to file it on their behalf.
That makes total sense. And I imagine then that you can also, get the person's firearms taken away if that, especially if they're threatening.
Yeah.
This is a pretty bad one, obviously. I mean, they're all bad, but I mean, this one's got, is especially, and imagine that the consequences are pretty, severe if someone violates a sexual harassment restraining order, sexual assault.
Yeah, it's a felony.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's, significant jail time, I take it.
It is.
There's another set of people that are protected, and this is newer rather than older, I guess, and especially when you're my age, and I consider this newer rather than older in terms of a protection act. And it's called the Vulnerable Adult Protection Order. I think in some states it's called Elderly Protection Order. I kind of gave away a little bit, but who's that meant to protect? And is it just elderly people, or what do they mean by vulnerable?
Vulnerable is anyone who maybe can't care for themselves, have maybe developmental disabilities, or receive in-home care. Anyone 60 years old or older that can't care for themselves. Those are the type of person this is meant to protect.
A lot of these so far have been about physical protection, or threats of physical violence. But this one kind of expands to that. This, because I know a lot of older adults and, like you said, vulnerable adults. It's so easy that either a family member or not can talk them out of money, can get them to do things. Can those things be protected against?
Yeah, this I think the language of it is specifically geared towards protecting people like that from anyone trying to steal money from them, basically. It protects their financial accounts. It could require an accounting from the accused or prohibit any transfer of the protected person's property.
I believe this one also includes adults who are in care homes, and are getting in-home care. So it sounds like the state's looking at the caregivers, with an eye.
Yeah, they are. So make sure they don't abuse their power over the protected person.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I know, let's say if someone has a trust and someone has a conservatorship, the court, as part of that, can actually make them come in and do an accounting, make them prove they were doing that. Can they do that just with this kind of an order?
Yeah, they can. So that the court will be aware of what that person has done with the protected person's funds or property.
I don't imagine that the firearm prohibition then goes into this one.
No, this is not really anything to do with violence. So it's more geared towards theft or embezzlement.
But again, someone decides to violate it, there's still consequences, aren't there?
Yeah, it's a misdemeanor.
We had kind of circling back as we talked about this, and this one is kind of interesting because you read it and you go, I don't even know what it means. It's called the Extreme Risk Protection Order. The heck is that?
That's for if someone is a danger to themselves or others. This, I imagine, was put in place to prevent people who were potentially in danger of committing suicide or in danger of, going on a rampage and, having a mass shooting or something like that. So it's to protect either that person or them from other people.
By getting the guns out of their hands.
Yeah, by removing the firearms.
Yep. Well, that makes complete sense. There's also, we hear the term stalking, and there is a stalking protection order. Maybe a little bit what is stalking, and how does it fit into this protection order?
Well, it was originally like physically stalking someone, but then, since the internet age has come out, there's cyber stalking. So, like following someone online, emails, things like that, that cause a person to be reasonably fearful that the perpetrator intends to injure them. So that's pretty much the standard.
And I noticed that, the term reasonably is put in there, and it's not necessarily on all of them. I mean, this one, and it seems right that because it is a can be innocent. I mean, I'm not saying it normally is, but I mean, there has somebody who's just fearful but it's not reasonable. It isn't going to be able to get that order. They're going to show a judge that, I'm not just overreacting.
Yeah. Because it could be innocent on the defendant's part, and the person asking for the order might be overreacting. So the court has to make sure that it's actually needed.
Yeah. I tell you, I get a call every day from this, one spot in somewhere in the world. And as far as I'm concerned, I want to get a stalking order on those people.
Yeah.
Well, can you get a firearms protection with the stalking order as well?
Potentially, yeah.
Now, we talked a little bit about it when we were talking about restraining orders, but there's actually just a no contact order. I mean, you can just go out and ask for a no contact order and a stalking no contact order, which, I kind of read that and went, oh, when do those kind of fall into place in the pantheon of domestic relations?
That's if criminal charges are pending. If someone maybe reported the person for stalking to the police and they're going to charge them with it, the crime of cyber stalking or something like that, then after the charges are pending, the police can put that into place to prevent them from contacting the victim.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of an old school type of protection order in criminal cases. The judge says, okay, I'm going to let you out, but you don't go contact this person.
Yeah, don't do that anymore.
Yeah, don't do that anymore.
That's what most of this is. It's the court saying, don't do that anymore.
Yeah. This isn't, that's a great thing to say. Let's talk about it for a couple seconds. None of this is, I found you did this, I'm going to punish you for doing that. You're going to go to jail, you're going to get a fine, you're in contempt. It's not those things, is it?
No, it's preventative measures for the future.
Yep. Which you have to show it's happened in the past.
Yeah.
It's like I said, the incident, the no contact, does that no contact also go both ways? Can the person bringing it be ordered not to contact the person that it's against?
I mean, usually it does end up that way because, it's not really feasible to say one person can't contact the other, but it doesn't go the other way, because there's still contact that exists if the other person is trying to contact them. So usually it is both ways.
This happens in criminal cases. Does the victim get to decide whether it's put in place or not, or is that up to the prosecutor, the state of Washington?
No, that's up to the state. It's their authority to put it in place.
Right. And if they remove it, to remove it.
Yeah.
This is, again, we just flew through our time. This has been really, really, really interesting and informative. But before we go, if someone comes into your office, I come into your office and I say, one of these things I think has happened. I mean, what would be your first piece of advice? I mean, what would you kind of tell them, either to get an order or prepare to get an order, or what would you tell them if they came and said, well, this thing happened, what should I do?
First thing I would tell them is, try to stay away from that person, like from the get-go. There doesn't need to be an order. Try to stay away from that person. Don't contact them. If they're around, just leave. And then, if any person is afraid for their safety, they fear any of this might happen, ask for the order. Just, don't question it. Just ask for it. The judge will decide if it's needed, and if they're going to order it. But if you in any way feel threatened, go for it.
That makes such sense. All right, Ben. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
No problem. Glad to do it.
It was great. Just kind of made some things clear. And in the pant, I mean, there's a lot of them, and it can be confusing. And so it's good to hear.
Yeah.
And everyone else, thank you for joining us as well. If anyone has any further questions on today's topic, obviously you can post it right here, and we can get you connected with Ben. I almost said no contact. Get you connected with Ben or another of our attorneys. So until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and be well. Thanks, Ben.
Bye.
Bye.